En we gaan alweer door. José, kan jij hier aan boord komen op dit schip? We hebben een spreker, Dan Fisher. Online komt hij. Hij is er al. Hi Dan. En José zal Dan introduceren, want José weet dat beter dan ik.
Hallo? Ja, ik heb geluid. Oké. Hello, Dan. I'm going to introduce... Oops, I'm not used to talk to a microphone. I'm going to introduce Dan Fisher to you. About 2 years ago, we were introduced with a lot of people to join in a workshop, eCPR. Angel is here too. She was there too. And it was completely new to us, and we discovered a wonderful, very warm method that was developed by Dan called eCPR. Now, as far as I understood, CPR is the method of resuscitation. Hoe noem je dat? Reanimeren. Ja, precies. Dankjewel. And eCPR is the so-called emotional CPR. This was developed by Dan Fisher, and Dan has his own history from which he developed this method. So I would like to give Dan the word. He was originally going to come to our conference, but because of Corona, we're going to do this by Zoom. So very welcome, Dan Fisher. I hope we can all hear you.
Hello, can you hear me? Oh, good. Yeah, I can hear you. I'm very sorry that I can't be there in person. I was actually just in Scotland, but that was with a small number of people doing emotional CPR trainings. And hopefully, when coronavirus subsides, I will be able to come once again to the Netherlands. Today, I'm going to go through sort of 4 parts of my own life and my own work. I'll talk a little bit about my childhood, a little bit about my what I found most important for my recovery, something about my political work in mental health, and then emotional CPR, which has been my more recent life work. As a child, I was raised in the United States, and my father's a doctor, and I experienced multiple traumas, despite coming from a professional family. My father developed a neurological degenerative disease, so he was really not available in my growing up. I was abused by a teacher when I was about 11 years old, sexually abused, and my sister developed anorexia, and I was expected to be the golden boy to sort of fix what was wrong with my sister and fix what was wrong with my family. So I was very dutiful. I was a good student, and I went to get a PhD in biochemistry to solve the so-called neurotransmitter problems, so-called, I say, because to date, and I don't think we ever will find that there is a specific biological basis to any of the behavioral or emotional issues that are called mental illness. And but I was a believer in my youth and believer in graduate school. And I got married, but my wife didn't really like that I was so scientific. So in fact, I woke up one night and said, I just want the facts, the hard, cold facts. Imagine that didn't go over very well in a personal relationship. So I also was a subject of the, or a product of the 60s politics. So I was opened up in terms of liberation. It was the late 60s, early 70s, the gay liberation, the disabled persons liberation, and liberation for people labeled with mental illness. So I was aware of this movement and reading about it. And I dove in. My wife left. My life fell apart, and I really felt that I had no future. But I decided to dive into every form of therapy. I dove into psychoanalysis. I dove into radical therapy, psychodrama therapy, peer support, and psychedelics. And I had a great therapist, even though I was labeled with schizophrenia and hospitalized on several occasions. He never insisted that I remain on medication. I think that was part of what saved me. I'm not anti-medication, but I'm not in favor of medication being the first and foremost way to solve people's problems. So each time I went into sort of a severe state, I went into a mute state and didn't speak, and that's called catatonia. And because we didn't have any alternatives to psychiatric hospitals, I was hospitalized on 3 occasions. And one time I spent an entire month in a mute state. And there's a friend of mine sent me a quote not so long ago by Louis Evely, a priest who used to give give talks, and he's from Belgium in the 60s. And people wrote them down. He never wrote them down. And he said that we each carry within us a mute being that is hidden within us. And it's through the love of other people that this mute being is drawn forth. It's a being so new that even those that carry him don't know him. Yet so authentic that they can't fail to recognize him once they discover him. And I believe in many ways my recovery of a life, and I don't think of it as recovery from an illness, but recovery of my life has been to discover that mute being, that nonverbal being, that emotional spirit or soul within me. The mental health system couldn't do a worse job in trying to nourish and develop that mute being. It actually just makes that mute being even more mute. However, there were, within the second hospitalization I was in, there were orderlies that did reach me. And also the other patients reached me. And this is why peer support, I think, has grown so popular, is that people with less formal clinical training often do a much better job of reaching people than people with a clinical training, because clinical training, unfortunately, takes, you have people that go into the field, very good-hearted, very humanistic, really wanting to help people, and then they're told, don't share your own feelings, don't share your own life. This is ridiculous. This is the most important element often in reaching somebody who's in distress, is to be human, to be authentic. And I also was very fortunate during that period. I met a woman who believed in me, and when I asked her, we're still married, when I asked her years later why she married me, she said she never saw me as sick. And this is a very important element in recovery, is to find people, to be around people who believe in you, people who don't see you as sick, who don't see you as having a permanent condition. I want to share a dream that I had. Dreams are very important. I really recommend writing your dreams down. I wouldn't say I really recommend having dreams, because I think everybody has dreams. It's just we rarely remember the dreams. And this dream I call a castle dream. And it really helped free me from this misconception that these problems are biological brain disorder problems. So in this dream, I see two colonels, two corporals. They're low ranking in the army, two corporals, and they're in a dungeon in a castle. And you all in Europe can relate to this. Castles, we don't actually have castles, but we're fascinated by castles and fairy tales and everything else. So these two corporals, they're in a dungeon, and they're looking through a microscope. And they look, and they're doing research in a microscope. And every once in a while, they go to their boss, who's a colonel, and they say to their boss, we want to get out of here. This is really dreadful, and we're sick of being trapped in this dungeon. And the boss, every time they would do it, he would, and this is actually, I've written a book about this called Heartbeats of Hope. So he would show them a picture of this gargoyle. This is a drawing I made. It looks like an angry dog to me, but in any event, he'd show them this picture and say, your brain looks like this, so you can't get out of here because you have a defective brain. And with a defective brain, you can't function in the world outside. I don't know if that sounds familiar. I think it's a tragedy that people who are just struggling to make sense of their life, struggling to heal, are repeatedly told, you've got a brain disorder. You can never really function in the world. And there's some very intelligent people's lives are just discarded. And unfortunately, they take their life at times because hope is robbed from them. And hope is one of the most important elements in being able to recover a life. So, and the dream goes on, believe it or not. This lieutenant comes in, does independent research, and he finds out that these young men just looked through a microscope a little too long. They developed a blind spot, but that it had healed, and their brains were fine. So the three of them go to the colonel, and he again tries to show them this gargoyle, and they say, that's nonsense, that's ridiculous. Their brains are fine. And they leave the castle, they leave the dungeon on to freedom. Well, that was it, just after my third hospitalization. And I had a lot more to go through to really understand what that dream was about. And several years later, I was meditating, and I looked at that gargoyle, and it was on a piece of parchment, and behind it was a map. And it was really the map of my 5th grade class when I was 11 years old. And it was that teacher in my 5th grade class that took me and many other young boys down to the basement of that school building, which was called the dungeon. And if you needed any further sort of connection between what's called psychosis and healing from a trauma, to me, that closed the case. And now much research has been shown that much of what's called psychosis is really attempts to heal a deep-seated trauma that needs to heal. After my last hospitalization, I asked myself if I wanted to live. And you know, when you're in other realities and people are not understanding what you're going through, you can definitely feel like life's not worth living. These are life and death situations really often. I felt I had to take care of a stray cat that had adopted me. You never know, but pets play an important role. So have something living around you. If you can't be a person, find a pet or find a plant or find something you need to take care of. That will be very, very important. Cat's name was Nosy, interestingly enough. And when I said I want to feed the cat, I also said yes to life, which was an important moment in my life. I was drawn to probably a form of some madness, actually. When I was hospitalized the second occasion, locked in seclusion, almost lost my spirit, I said, what can I do? What can I do to survive this? And I said to myself, well, I'll become a psychiatrist and unlock all the hospitals and let everybody out of, psychiatric hospitals. And I went to see my psychiatrist therapist, and he was a marvelous guy. He was the guy who said, you don't necessarily have to take medication. And but then I announced to him, I've been labeled with schizophrenia, but I'm going to become a psychiatrist. And he said, I'll be at your graduation. And he was 6 years later. Somehow, I'm not sure how, I think it was through family support and friend support, I got through medical school, and I went to my residency at Harvard University in Boston. And people go, oh, that was so, esteemed, Harvard University. But what they don't know and realize, I didn't choose Boston and Harvard because of Harvard. I chose it because Boston was the home of the Mental Patient Liberation Front. I knew that in order to survive the brainwashing that the system was going to impose upon me, that I had to have the support of a radical XN. I think you all use XN. XN, we use, people lived experience, people who've been, categorized, labeled. Anyway, that movement was starting in the 70s in the US. And Boston was one of the 5 sites, New York, San Francisco, Portland, and Philadelphia. And so I went there to be a member. They didn't actually allow me to be a full member because I was in psychiatric training. They said, well, you're in psychiatric training, so you can't be a full member of our inner society. So I was a friend of the Mental Patient Liberation Front. It was there that I met Judy Chamberlain and also met her book, On Our Own, it's called. And this has really been the Bible, a lot of the Bible, I'd say, of our movement. This woman, Judy Chamberlain, for those of you who haven't heard of her, she was absolutely astoundingly prescient and forward-thinking. She subtitled this, Patient-Controlled Alternatives to the Mental Health System. And there's her signature. She died 10 years ago, but her spirit lives on in me and many, many who she touched. Her fire, her enthusiasm, her non-compliance. she helped me start, along with Pat Deegan and Laurie Hearn, helped start the National Empowerment Center in 1992. And she had an article for our newsletter, Confessions of a Non-Compliant Patient. And I said, we're federally funded. I don't know whether we can publish this paper. And she said, you have to publish it. We did, and it was very popular with many people in recovery, not so popular with the federal government. We've been walking a tightrope between federal funding and representing our movement. And we did some research. How do people recover a life? And I say recover a life, not recover from an illness. So how do people recover life? They're the factors that we see repeatedly again now, and this we came out with in the late 90s, self-determination. We want to run our own lives. We want to define these problems as emotional distress and oppression, not as mental illness. We want hope, and we want to learn to connect at an emotional level. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I've done a lot of work on, fighting oppression and forming various political groups. But I really want to share with you my present passion, which is emotional CPR. I believe that in order to really have people recover lives, we need to go way beyond the mental health system. So we need to reach the general public. We need to reach people in their everyday lives. And fortunately, the misfortune of COVID has provided an opportunity for people to realize that everybody can suffer.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you. You have 3 minutes, to end your... Sorry, I have to say this. You have 3 more minutes for your presentation, for the Q&A.
3 minutes, okay.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
But I thought I got 20 minutes and I started 3 minutes after. I'm not sure I want to be compliant. I'll do the best I can. So with emotional CPR, we've found that relationships are so important in people's recovery, but nobody knows how to form a relationship, it seems. And certainly the mental health system doesn't have a clue. So we've found that really it's people's authenticity. If you can be authentic with another person, you can be with them in the fullness of your own experience. Not try to fix them, believe in their capacity to heal, and really accept the unknown together with them. Then people are able to access their own power to heal, and their own power to heal is really what drives them. I won't quote her completely, but you have a local trainer in emotional CPR, Jessica DeVries, and she described that for her, she felt she wasn't alone when she took emotional CPR. Sure, when I talk to others, I'm in the same room, but this time I felt different. I could let him in and share myself. I felt intimate, fundamentally meaningful. This was the true connection is about. Other times, she said she assisted, and in assisting, she could reach people. Emotional CPR is really for one's own development as well as for the development of other people. And we need to develop our power. We need to develop our voice. We need to develop our sense of self. We need to do it through relating with other people. And our movement has sort of hit or miss done that. But I believe through practicing more of this emotional CPR, we can enhance everybody's capacity to have a voice and be able to help each other. And there are a website that you all can share for emotional CPR. And I hope that I'll have an opportunity to do another training. So how's that? I welcome some questions, by the way, or statements or comments. And I'm sorry that I didn't thank Angela and Jose for helping to put this together, but it would have taken into my time.
Thank you very much, Dan, for your personal story. And we're going to give a little bit of the opportunity for questions to you, of people.
Mr. Fisher, hear me?
Barely.
Yeah, can you hear me, Mr. Fisher?
Much better, yes.
Okay, okay. Well, first of all, thank you for your wonderful presentation. It described a lot. I'm a recovering in life as well. Let's put it that way. Thought you said that very well. I don't have a definition for recovery, but I do have a formula for it, and it's called perspective plus connection is recovery. And I was wondering which part of your perspective has helped you the most in your recovery?
Could you repeat what recovery is to you?
Recovery equals perspective plus connection.
Perspective plus connection.
Perspective plus connection, yes.
Perspective plus
yeah,
connection.
Because you need...
I think it's very vital. Well, first of all, you can't recover alone. You need relationships. You need other people to recover.
Indeed,
You need people, and you need people who you can connect with well enough, yes, that you can change your perspective, you can change your point of view.
Yeah.
And that really only occurs, I think, on an emotional level. When you connect with someone on an emotional level, then you might consider a new point of view.
Yeah.
That was true for me. It was really through peers, connecting with peers, that I could start to think beyond the narrow confines of my what I call monological thinking. Yes, yes, perspective and connection.
Yes,
very good.
Thank you very much.
Nice question.
Anybody else? Right. Kom even hier.
Thank you. Okay, this is working. Thank you. Thank you for your lecture, Dan. I have a question. I recently listened to a podcast from Rokus Lopik. Maybe you've heard of him. And no, you haven't. Okay. Well, he referred to emotional CPR as an alternative for POD, peer-supported open dialogue. And I was wondering if you agree with him and in what way it differs.
What was the name of the person again?
Rokus Lopik, but yeah.
I'm not sure I know him, but well, I think of it as complementary to peer-supported open dialogue. I personally practice open dialogue. I could have given a talk on that. The drawback of open dialogue is that it remains a clinically directed procedure, even though it's probably the most respectful and democratic approach that I've seen from the clinical world. Open dialogue is a good complement to it. I see families, and I provide them with an opportunity to dialogue among each other. But I also provide them training in emotional CPR, and I say, well, this is what you can do when you're home. This is what you can do, for each other. because ultimately, I mean, you know, the therapy sessions are a small part of a person's life, hopefully. There's living their life. And actually one family, a young man who was in distress, and I often get mother calling me about their son in distress, and I'll say, we all meet as a family. And they're like a little taken aback by that. But I went over the principles of emotional CPR, and this young man who didn't really speak very much, put them on the refrigerator, and he'd say to his parents when they were following or not following emotional CPR. And so I think it's a good compliment. There's still going to be families, you know, that need the intensive open dialogue. And I think peer support open dialogue is very important because peers can reach people that the open dialogue can't reach. So yeah, I'd say emotional CPR, peer support, and open dialogue is a good trio.
Hello, my name is George.
Well,
Hi. Daniel, do you believe the path you are walking is the path of your destiny?
you know, a friend asked me that recently too. Well, I'm not overtly a religious person, and I am a little new agey. I think there are, let me put it this way, I think there are forces in the universe that work through each of us that are beyond our comprehension or our consciousness. And I do feel as though this is not my own work. This is like the synthesis of many people. And even when, I guess it was Angela was introducing me, and the person who was introducing me said, oh, emotional CPR was created by Daniel Fisher. There are probably 60 people who have been continuously working on this. This is a collective effort. And as is the peer movement and the XN movement, it's a collective effort because we're just like, you know, blind men on the elephant. And I just feel like I'm one of those blind people on the elephant. Maybe I've had a little more good fortune to live a little longer than some of my other pioneer people. But no, I don't feel like it's just my destiny.
Can I ask you also a question? I'm working for Thrive. Maybe you heard of Thrive. It's about prevention of mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's an international movement, and it's also now in Amsterdam. And I was wondering, what could ECPR mean for prevention of mental health issues?
Oh, very much. I see it as a preventative. If you're in distress, and there are 1,000 things one can be in distress over, and pandemic is obviously a big one right now. If you don't have the support, you go into isolated, thinking, and that leads to delusions or, misconceptions and all kinds of difficulties in your day-to-day life that get labeled mental illness. If you, however, are around people that you can talk with, you can share with, you can heal with, you can understand with, then it's just part of the normal healing experience, actually for both people too, by the way. Then your heart warms, your heart grows, your heart opens, and then you don't end up with mental illness. I mean, I really do believe that at one point in the future, there will be no longer what we call mental illness. There'll just be periods of time when people need time to heal, and there'll be people around them saying, oh yeah, there's a healing time. And in developing countries, countries that are industrially less precise but are humanistically more developed, really, like in Africa, they see this. They say, oh, at this point, Jose or somebody, they need a break. Okay, let's give them a break, and now let's bring them back into society. We are so inhumane. We're like, that's something to be removed. It's, that person's to be removed. And, I don't want to get deeply into capitalism being a big part of this, but let's face it. I mean, the pharmaceuticals have too much money. They're making much too much money on people's misery. We should have people, not pills. Much more emphasis on people.
Okay. One last question for Dan. Yes.
My name is Marike, and I don't have a question, but I wanted to ask the person behind the laptop, and maybe we could wave to him, because I see that Dan haven't seen us. So if the person behind the laptop could,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and lets us wave to him. Exactly. Thank you, Dan. It's amazing to have you here with us.
Wow,
Oh,
thank you.
Glad to see there are more people. I was beginning to think it was just Jaco and one other person. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Is there a question that goes with that, or is that just a statement?
Statement.
Give
Statement.
Dan a big applause.
Thank you very much. I'm going to leave you all with rest.
And
now.
maybe one more question I'll fill in. Dan, what do you wish for the Netherlands in all this? What do you wish to be happening in the Netherlands for this team? Can you give us a
Easy
good
question,
vibe?
right? Well,
Then-
I hope you all can attend the Alternatives Conference, by the way. I meant to mention, starts next week, July 8th. Go to Alternatives-Conference. It's international conference. It's online. It's free. You just register, and then you can experience the workshops and even our action groups. I hope that you all will be able to take take the passion and the anger and the upsets and fashion them into energy for change and for advocacy, so that you can really genuinely change your system and create alternatives. I think you have one or two peer-run, we call them respite centers. I feel like that's one of the most important initiatives to emphasize. Small home-like voluntary centers where people can go instead of hospitalization. We have 32 in the U.S., and I think there are one or two of them here in the Netherlands. New Zealand has one, and Australia. Keep creating alternatives to the existing structure in terms of thinking, in terms of places to help each other out.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. Even schakelen, heb ik hier weer geluid.
Oh, also give Jessica's email address to people, please.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Ja, wauw, wat mooi hè, zo dat het kan, deze techniek en zoveel wijsheid.